the discussion today on developing your outreach plan. I just want to start with introductions. So I could see, is it Elena saying that problem with the webcam, but audio seems to be working fine? Okay, so if we want to start with introductions, just let everybody know your name, your title, and what institution you're from. I guess, actually, I'll start since I'm the one talking. My name is Jason Cruz. I'm the undergraduate engagement librarian at Northwestern University, and I'm on the academic outreach committee. Anybody can jump in.
Hi, oh, go ahead.
Oh, ladies first.
Thank you. This is Shauna Edson from University of Wisconsin Parkside in Kenosha. I am not an outreach librarian. I do instructional design, but I've done programming and so outreach in that respect.
Good day, everybody. I'm C.T. Nanu. I'm an outreach librarian as well as a visual communication librarian at the universities at Shady Grove, a branch of the University of Maryland Libraries.
I guess I can go. My name is Eva Sklipa. I'm first year engagement librarian. I'm actually stepping in for our outreach and engagement librarian who couldn't make it today. So not officially outreach librarian, but I do some work with programming. I'm at UNC Wilmington.
Hi, I'm Paige Barretto. I'm also from University of Wisconsin Parkside, and I am the outreach and marketing librarian here.
Hi, I'm Elena Principato, and I'm at Nevada State College, and my title is Outreach and Engagement Librarian.
Hi, I'm Melissa Anderson. I am the Campus Engagement and Research Services Librarian at Southern Oregon University.
Great, thanks everyone for being here and participating in the discussion. So to start off with, oh, and I should say, you know, we do a lot of these discussions, and for the most part, most schools don't have outreach librarians or engagement librarians. So, you know, anybody's welcome. We all know on the committee that most everybody is doing outreach in academic libraries. So, you know, don't worry if you're not an outreach librarian. But to start out with, how many of us here actually use some sort of outreach plan?
I do.
Can you tell us about it?
Certainly. So just to give everybody a bit of a background, I just got hired here at the universities at Shady Grove in January of 2019, and I'm coming from a K-12 classroom teaching background. So most of my outreach experiences were from there. But as far as my current role, entitled and responsibilities there.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry. Welcome. We're just got started, and we're asking everybody to mute their mic to limit the background noise until you have to speak.
Should I start from the beginning? I'm not sure if anybody heard or didn't hear me. Sure.
Why don't you go ahead and just repeat that?
Sure. Okay. So I'm a first-time librarian overall. Got hired in 2019 here at the University of Shady Grove and at University of Maryland Libraries. My prior experience is in K-12 classroom teaching. So most of my outreach experiences deal with the K-12 community, but I'm bringing that, of course, with me in my new role in higher ed. With Pretty Library here at the University of Shady Grove, we actually have a first-time strategic plan that we're putting together. We've been working on it since January of this year, and we were commissioned both by the executive.
So, I think we lost sound here. Is anybody else hearing?
It looks like someone muted him.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I just unmuted myself. I'm not sure how it happened, but I'm not sure what the last thing was that I was saying before I got muted again.
Okay, so I heard teaching and outreach plan.
Gotcha. So we're working on a strategic plan here at the universities at Shady Grove, the pretty library that is, and part of that plan engages with how we outreach on and off campus. So so far, considering this is the first time that a strategic plan has been implemented or is being implemented, and also an outreach plan with a strategic plan is being implemented, we're basically gathering information from our colleagues, that's the program directors, the faculty, the students, staff as well on campus, and then other colleagues of ours that are at a different campus, the main campus actually of the University of Maryland in College Park. We're located in Rockville, North Potomac in Maryland. But basically gathering the information on what has been effective for outreach and what would be more engaging or more effective for outreach if there has been a lack thereof in past months or years. So that's the approach we've generally taken, collecting data and through surveys and the like.
Excellent. Anyone else have currently using an outreach plan?
By a plan, do you mean something that's like a formal calendar of outreach events, or I'm not sure if what we do is actually a plan. We have a programming and outreach committee that has a number of events and activities that we plan during the year, and we do assess, the effectiveness of those events. And I just got a new staff person this year working for me in January, and we're going to work on a marketing plan for next year to kind of have these things be a little more codified and have a calendar where we can actually kind of do a little bit more advanced work to make sure everything is going the way it's supposed to, and not just rely on the committee kind of coming up with ideas sort of haphazardly. I'm not sure if I would call this an official plan, but we definitely have some ideas about where we'd like to make this maybe a little more official.
Yeah, I guess when we were coming up with the questions for this, we intentionally didn't define what a plan was, because I think everybody approaches it quite differently, and a calendar is certainly a component of that. And that's, I think a lot of places, that's what they use as sort of their plan. But there's other elements that people use. So yeah, we're not really limiting on what that means to any particular person. Anybody else? Okay, for those of us who aren't using any formal outreach plan, how do you manage your outreach throughout the year or even longer term?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. I just wanted to say that, so I am also new to my role. So I started in February, and the outreach position is a new role at the library. So I'm definitely looking just for advice on how to create a plan, because I, have my Google Doc right now where I'm sort of using that as my calendar and list of ideas on what's been done. But I definitely want to have a more sort of formal way to put it all together.
Great.
And I can talk some, again, I'm not the official outreach librarian here, but sort of what I know of our setup. We have the one outreach engagement librarian, and generally he kind of runs our social media and does a lot of our outreach and programming. But when other librarians sort of throughout the
بس ما عم يطلع صوت أنا هنا عم يطلع
when other librarians throughout the institution have projects that they'd like to work on, we actually have a marketing request form, so we can submit those through SharePoint. In our case, is our sharing system, and then we'll usually kind of meet with him and work something out. But we don't have anything especially formal yet. I think we're kind of also in the info gathering stage.
Anybody else want to share what they do?
Sure, I can tell you here at UW Parkside, it's pretty informal. We're a pretty small staff, so we just kind of come up with ideas, and then kind of get together and plan them. We did use Trello for a while, and people really seemed to like it. And then I think we just sort of stopped for some reason. But I think it would be helpful for us to have more of a plan in place, or something that we can kind of go back to and look at ideas that we've had, or more of a schedule. I think that would definitely be helpful as far as planning things out in advance.
So you mentioned Trello. Is anybody else using Trello or Slack or any other tool to sort of manage different programs throughout the year, or planning?
I use Trello for my own personal organization, but I don't think we use it as an organization as a whole. But I find it very useful for sure.
My library department, we use Basecamp for all library projects. I believe that's a premium subscription. I do think we pay for it, but it is a really nice tool for creating a project that you can collaborate with others. I haven't tried yet to use it with folks outside the department, but I understand there's a way that I can share the project with, say, the Writing Center or whoever I'm collaborating with, and that they can then access it. So I'm exploring that to use, again, sort of as a project level thing for individual events, but I do want some other kind of tool to help me like look at the year overall and kind of have that higher level overview.
We've been using Trello here. I'm probably the worst at it. It works really well, especially when we're going back at the end of the year and trying to track what we did, just because it moves pretty easily, and we sort of do it just to track what we're working on, what's done, and then what's plans for the future. So we find it pretty easy when we're all using it, because I think it's just another it's another thing that we have to remember to use.
So I have a question about the Trello. So I've used Trello before, and I'm wondering how you set it up for outreach. Do you kind of use it as a calendar with having every month be a board, or what does it look like?
No, we don't use it in that way. What we do is we would have like one section is for just current projects that are being worked on, and then we would have another. So then we would just move the card to, when it's finished, it moves to the finished or completed section. So we really use it in a very basic form in that way, but we also use it to sort of use it as the checklist functions, to be able to track progress on there. We use a lot of different things as we're trying to manage. I would say overall, it's really used to go back and look at, to keep everybody in our department informed what we're working on, but also to go back at the end of the year to be able to remember what we worked on, because that's, it's better than going through a personal calendar and trying to remember things. But it's, I'm sure that there are people who are using Trello in a different way.
Jason, could I make a comment about Trello, if I may? I'm a heavy user of it for my own projects and things. We haven't successfully gotten the entire library to use it. I think we're about to move to Microsoft Teams. That seems to be a university thing, so that's kind of the direction we're going. But yeah, the way that a lot of people use Trello for projects of this type are kind of what you were saying. You set up you set up a board for the project or whatever it happens to be, and then you set up the tasks such that you indicate what people are currently working on. So you have a list of cards for that, and then you have a list of what's up next, so people kind of know what's coming up. Maybe you can't start on those things until other things are being worked on. And then there's a list maybe of things you're waiting on. So if there's things that you can't really do because somebody possibly outside the group has to do it and you're waiting on those things. And then there's a list of the things you've done. So this does give you that ability to look at that and see what's been accomplished already and have notes on that as well.
Thanks, Drew.
Thank you.
So there are different reasons that people use plans or calendars or other programs just to manage the programming that they're doing throughout the year. And I'm sort of curious on the reasons people are doing it. If you have a plan, or if you're just maintaining a calendar, or if you're doing something just very basic, with a Word document, keeping your a list of the things that you do throughout the year. What is your plan or sort of plan do for you or your institution? And is this something that your administration or somebody higher up than you needs to see, or anything? I'm just curious to see if there's sort of a personal thing, or if it's more of a institutional.
So I guess from our perspective at UW Parkside, Paige and I, we've worked on one program that I've been involved in outreach for, and it's the NEA Big Read. And so the nice thing about that is they do have certain things that you have to hit. So certain programs that you have to host, which kind of provides you with the structure for outreach. And we've done it for a couple of years, as I'm sure some of you have done with your programs each year. You kind of grow it, and then each year you kind of have that structure for outreach. So each year we're kind of using that as our framework and trying to hit those basic goals, but then we're also always trying to try new things and expand. So just for an example, for one program that we did outreach for that I was involved in, that's sort of our structure for it, and that's as formal as we got. As Paige said, a lot of our marketing and outreach is pretty informal. So and that particular program, the NEA Big Read, is one of our biggest focuses when we participate. And so yeah, that's just sort of a little bit of the framework for that.
I would say for us at the universities at Shady Grove, whether it be the outreach plan or the overall strategic plan stems from the need to have one because it didn't previously exist. The institution itself, universities at Shady Grove in particular, has been around for 20 or so years, and then our library, the Pretty Library, has existed for about 17 or 18 of those 20 plus years. But from my understanding of the history of the library here at the institution, there hasn't been a cohesive and consistent plan, whether it be something as simple as a general library mission and vision statement that is matched and continually kept up with the institution's overall mission and vision statement. And then of course connecting back to the University of Maryland libraries, because we are a branch library and not in College Park but in a completely different county in the same state, there's also the need to cohesively work with our main campus at College Park, Maryland at the same time. So a lot of the outreach is how do we address our main campus, this institution known as the Universities at Shady Grove, and the literal 9 affiliate institutions that are here on campus throughout the state of Maryland, while mainly connecting with our main campus in College Park and the identity through the university's library system, UMD libraries.
Any other thoughts on this? So yeah, I mean, I've been doing this quite a long time, and we are just recently, my colleague and I, who've been doing this together for about 7 years, where our main function is outreach and engagement. We just realized as we were planning for this, because he's also on the committee, planning for this discussion and coming up with the questions, that we don't really have an outreach plan. It's mostly in our head because we've been the only 2 that have been working on it sort of exclusively, but now we've expanded and we have more people, and our administration supports us. So it doesn't, we aren't really required to submit things like this, outcomes, goals, plans. And so we just recently were saying, yeah, we need to get on that and actually put this on paper, because it's fine that it's in our head and we know the calendar throughout the year and we know when programs take place. But at a certain point, somebody else is going to need to know or want to know what's happening. So yeah, I mean, it's you know, there's a lot of reasons to answer for it. For us, it's sort of personal, but at some point it could become an administrative requirement. But we find that just even practicing with things like we do for our bigger events, having reports, just a one-page report on what the outcomes were, any stats that are involved in it. So it helps we found that it helps to sort of justify to ourselves, like, is this really meeting the goals that we set out for it? If not, why? Is this something we should stop doing? Should we tweak it? And that's been really helpful.
I know that here, outreach is definitely part of our overall strategic plan. That's not necessarily, like, I like the idea of the reports consistently, because I don't necessarily know that we have that across the board. It's usually kind of project by project, projects that are tied to strategic plan goals are logged in our strategic plan tracker, and then we'll sort of log, like, okay, did we achieve this? How can we tell? But it's only for the ones that wind up in there. So I like the report site.
Anybody else have thoughts on sort of the purpose of developing a plan or a calendar?
Well, I had a quick question for everybody regarding calendars. So the libraries, and my library is in a particular unique situation where we're on another campus, but we're affiliated with a bigger campus elsewhere. I'm wondering how you all have, in your experiences, effectively put together calendars for the purposes of outreach. Because in our case, we want to collaborate with departments that are here in Shady Grove, which is the campus that we're at. We also want to stay connected again with our College Park colleagues in the University of Maryland at College Park, but again, they are across town, so to speak. So how would, in your experiences, everyone, an effective approach to calendar building and calendar planning, what would that look like, essentially?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, this is Sahar. I was finally able to join. I am so sorry. I'm so glad to be with you all. I'm gonna try to actually share the same question as well. The only thing we do is we have a calendar on SpringShare, which is basically where we have also the Ask a Librarian installed and everything, and the chat service, the online chat. And what we do is we have everyone plug in their upcoming events. But to be honest, this is one of the biggest challenges, because we also have 4 branches. You know, everyone is so busy with their schedule, and they just end up, you know, just planning at the last minute. And so I share your concern, but this is the only thing we were able to do so far, is sort of have an online calendar, which us as the main library, the main branch, we try to overlook or, you know, manage, if you want.
Is anybody else using a system, a calendaring system that has been effective, or another method?
We're big on Google Calendar at my institution, and so if I was planning an event that I wanted the program and outreach committee to help out with, I would just share it with all of them, invite them to put it on their calendars, and then we would be sharing it that way. We also have a few sort of library-wide shared calendars that if I put something on there, then it's on everybody's calendar. So there are things like that we do, and it works more or less. I mean, people sometimes start getting blind to things even that are on their own calendars, but it works more or less.
Yeah, I've heard of some institutions using Google Forms, so they just create a so just a simple form that people can input, and then it just is in a Google Sheet essentially, so everyone can get at it. Anyone else using something that they found is working really great or working poorly and want to warn people against? So here, as I said, it's kind of all in our heads, so we just manage it. My colleague has a big yearly dry erase calendar in his office that he's really good at tracking that. We keep it in our Outlook calendars, but again, as we're expanding duties and our department, we want to make sure that everybody has access to a calendar. So we haven't really found anything yet, at least beyond a spreadsheet. Generally, we have one big spreadsheet that we kind of have time of year, and sometimes that's even for the big events that it's easy to just say in the fall we know we have these these three things, in the spring we have these three things, and then smaller events, tracking those maybe in a slightly different way, just adding them to the list. But yeah, I haven't found any calendaring system that works really well either.
Thanks everybody for the input.
So going back to something that I was talking about earlier, do any of you include or have to include goals or outcomes in the programming that you do, whether it's part of a plan or not? Is that something that anyone is doing here?
Absolutely, we are. We have before we come up with a new program, we have a sheet we have to fill out that says, what are the outcomes for this program? What are we estimating the costs will be? What are we estimating the attendance will be? Things like that. And then we have a post-program evaluation form that we also fill out that we check against, our estimates at the beginning to see how well we actually did what we thought we were going to do, and have a place to make notes for what we would do differently and what to remember for next time.
And do you use that as a form of assessment in any way, or is it just sort of an internal, this is what we did, this is what the outcomes were, and we did or did not meet them?
We do use it for assessment, and then we include it, and we have every year we have to do a report that's assessing all of our activity in the library, and so that goes directly into that report. Then, I mean, some of the takeaways go into that report, and then we submit that to the university administration, and it feeds into accreditation stuff, but it is part of our sort of planning, and it is linked to our strategic plan and strategic goals as well.
Actually, I have a question about this. So do you guys use specific metrics? Like what do you look at in those, let's say, activities or events? Because sometimes we have events that don't get a lot of attendance, but they actually have value, like in terms of if you want the outcome that we wanted, or maybe the number of students we were targeting is actually smaller than the general population of the community. So what do you do in that case? How do you assess those smaller scale activities?
Well, we have to be really careful when we're crafting our goals to kind of take that stuff into consideration. So, before I've only been here 2 years, so and this is a new role a new position that didn't exist before. I mean, the position existed, but the engagement part wasn't part of it. So I've had to kind of, create some of this stuff on the fly, but before they mostly rely just on gate counts and attendance, but I've been really careful to try to reframe the conversation, because some of the things that we've had that I feel have been extremely successful that were new might have had a lower gate count than other events that have happened, but they might have really been targeting first year brand new students, which is a really important group to connect with early on. So we've tried to write our goals carefully so that we could have different kinds of metrics besides just attendance and gate count. We also, we have surveys and things like that. We've tried to talk about engagement in lots of ways that is more than just, counting the number of people who showed up at something.
Okay, thank you.
I have something to share about this. So our Nevada State College, our assistant director, Tiffany, has been on one of the ECRL committees working on the project outcome for academic libraries toolkit, which is now available. So sorry if I'm stealing the thunder of our ECRL committee folks who are here, but I just wanted to share that if you're looking to develop surveys, they provide some suggested questions that you can ask. And I haven't pulled this up yet, but the way she described it is that you can upload your data from those surveys into some kind of shared portal. And with keeping all of the questions standard, you're then able to compare your outcomes to those at other institutions. So for example, for the events and programs questions, there's things like, I learned something new from this event or program, I feel more confident about using what I learned, those kinds of things. And those are all on the Likert scale, 1 to 5. And then there also is room to ask some more open-ended questions as well. So that's kind of a neat tool that just launched recently.
One thing that
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
One thing that occurs to me as you all share your stats and the way that you track engagement and outreach. One thing that we did this past year was we participated in National Voter Registration Day, which was like back in October. Some of you are probably familiar with it, but we basically set up a table, and as students approached us, we talked to them about whether they were a registered voter and how they could get that, showed them how they could become a registered voter or double check their voter registration, and kind of talk to them about the upcoming in November, the election and things like that. So we compared that data, just the number of students that we talked to. We kind of compared that to if you were at the reference desk and how many students you would have talked to, just as a really basic comparison, because I know a few of you had shared that you have certain forms and stats that you have to provide to the university administration. We don't really have anything like that. So just as a really basic way to compare, was this program successful? That's like a really basic comparison, but that's kind of where we're at. So it helped us to kind of see how effective something like that was compared to the other amount of time that we would have been at the desk. So anyway, I know that's really basic, but it just kind of struck me as we were talking.
No, that's a really, really good point. We do something similar with, so we've done pop-up libraries for years now, and we've changed it so many times, excuse me, where we were in the res halls, and that was ineffective. We were in dining halls, that was ineffective. We were at the student center, and that one was a little better. But because we set outcomes of, we wanted this to increase traffic to research consultations, we were getting people stopping by, but they weren't asking about the services. It was like, why are you here? And we would talk to them and they'd be like, oh, okay. So while we had maybe 30, 40 interactions while we were doing it, it still wasn't meeting our goal. So we were toying with the idea of scrapping it, but what we did is we just changed it, and we've used it in a few different ways. And the most effective one that we found recently is helping students find textbooks for their class right inside the entrance. We actually set up right by our information commons desk, and we see huge amounts of traffic. One, because we're framing it around the money issue. So we have, the sign just is like, do you have your text, do you have your textbook? Are you looking for course reserves? I can't remember exactly what the sign says, but we get more people stopping by because they are, and we set up the first week of classes, and just the traffic is huge and the impact is huge. So we set the outcomes very, in a specific way, and using the same pop-up library essentially with a podium and a sign, we were able to get better impact just by tweaking it and moving it just right inside our own library. So yeah, and we've done that with other things where we, setting outcomes, and they don't have to be, at least in our case, we don't try to set them as like everything, it has to be that they're learning something, but just even setting something small, like an outcome. It's hard to do when it's, maybe the event is just to have fun, like the outcome is fun. That's not really an outcome, but setting it so that you can, that they're reasonable and that you can potentially meet them. I think we've struggled for many years on how to assess it. Well, we count everything, but if you talk to 1,700 students during orientation week, that doesn't necessarily mean anything if there are no outcomes or there's no, goals, at least in our case, because, it just year to year, it really, that total amount just helps us in terms of staffing, honestly. So we've changed it over time to include outcomes, so we know we're actually hitting what we want to hit.
That's a really interesting idea because, how many questions do we get about textbooks within the first 2 weeks? And one of the big things with freshmen is they don't always understand what the difference between the library and the bookstore is and what our policies are on collecting textbooks. So kind of flip it and use it as an outreach opportunity, a small outreach opportunity to serve a need that, we see that a lot. That's a really good idea. I'm writing that down. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been really effective, and I think we frame it not even around because we can push other things. So it's if we don't have it, it might be on reserve. If it's not on reserve and we don't have it in our collection, then we push people to interlibrary loan and get them set up with their account. So we can get them familiar with a bunch of services all on the very first couple of weeks, which it was surprising to us. We were just like, no, we'll try it out and see what happens, and it's been really successful. Anybody else using outcomes or goals?
At the Pretty Library, we are using, generally speaking, goals and select outcomes, and it's more so focused on the strategic plan, since this is the first time we're doing it. The way we're approaching it is more on a 3 to 5 year time frame. We want to accomplish all these things at the end of these 3 to 5 years. Within the first year, though, we want to be able to effectively do this or do more of this or that. So it really depends. Regarding outreach, of course, it really depends on what, again, department we're working with, if it's at the institution here in Montgomery County, Maryland, or what colleagues of ours at the main campus in College Park that we're possibly going to be working with overall when it comes to UMD libraries.
Excellent. So going back to talking about managing programs or plans or calendars, so Melissa, you named a number of things that you collect. Anybody else who are doing calendars or plans or just tracking, are you using, what kinds of things are you tracking in addition to and I'm talking just general information, like what kinds of things are important to you when you are talking about a program? What pieces of information?
So, oh, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I'll just say this real quick. So for Pretty Library, we use both a lot of Google software applications and also SpringShare's Live Insight as far as tracking. We do a lot of that as well. And then we do, use Microsoft Office as far as like collecting data, Microsoft Excel and whatnot. There's not one platform, if you will, that we've, as a library team or family, focused on. It's pretty much, this is what we have used in the past and that's what's worked. So we're just kind of keeping up with that instead of trying to create a brand new wheel.
And do you collect dates or topics or themes around
Yeah.
system that it to track like what kinds of events you're doing or programs?
More or less. So, and to answer the question, some of it got garbled up, but I think I got the gist of it. So when we're collecting our data, let's say with the surveys that we took from students, program directors, and faculty, a lot of it that we found, for example, a lot of it deals with available resources and non-ebook resources as well that we're able to provide. And if we are able to construct an event where it could be a workshop where we're showing students and faculty and staff, hey, these are the available services and resources that we have, and here's how to use them, or other events that we may partner with another department that focuses on student engagement or student success. I'm forgetting the name of our department. I think it's career and academic services is one department that we work with. They also have their own services that overlap or correlate with what we do here at the library. So we collect data in some cases through the surveys, like, what did you think of this event? Or through, as I mentioned, Spring Shares Live Insight, where if we're doing a workshop, we have particular look-fors, if you will, audience or a number of audience members or people who attended the day of the week, and again, other information. We use that kind of information to assess what's working during, in this case, spring 2019 semester, and where do we have the most student or patron involvement from month to month, and do we need to focus more so during this period of time in the semester, or do we need to try to bring more people at the beginning and at the end of the semester when typically there's not a lot of patron gate counts, if you will. So
we also look at the world calendar. We look at like themes that we might make use of. So in certain months, if there are, I don't know if this is related to your question, we look at like trends or a topic that's really hot at this point, and we try to accommodate for that as well. Of course, keeping in mind also the university calendar. This usually helps us a lot with the ideas. So even if it's something, like it's on a small scale, but it helps us with maybe having a small exhibit, a small initiative. So we keep that in the background whenever we want to come up with an initiative, we keep that in mind. For example, this year we're talking a lot about the SDGs, and we're trying to incorporate them in our strategy. So we're trying to incorporate those also in our events somehow. So this might be like a little inspiration, if you like.
Jason, if I understood also the question, I think you were also asking kind of what type of information we collect, maybe from events or programs. Because I think for me, one of the most important pieces of information is really how did the person hear about the event or program. And the reason that's so important to me is, and I can think of some events we've done, like an all day or day and a half dissertation forum for our graduate students. And one year we just made a real push of marketing it in every way we could think of, whether it was big screen signage within the library, whether it was big screen signs over in the student center on campus, which required a lot of upfront work and submission to get everything scheduled and ready for that, whether it was flyers, whether there was just lots of things we did. But when we asked the students who attended, how did you hear about it? Around 90 to 95% said it was pretty much email from their faculty members, their advisors, whoever. And from my way of thinking, that kind of told me that a lot of that effort was probably pretty much wasted effort, that almost none of the attendees came in those ways except through that, and that we should really work hard to make sure that we're using methods that will reach the people we want to reach, because that energy can be spent better on how we market.
That's great. I mean, I think that's really helpful to inform. I mean, that's, as you're planning throughout the year, it's that is one piece of information we've been trying to track as well, because you could make signs and spend all day flyering and, and it may be as simple. One way that we found is really effective is all of the campus partners we work with, we just hit them, we give them and let them do the promotion, and we get more bang for our buck that way than putting up signs or trying to figure out how to get on email lists as well. So Har, your point about the having sort of a backup, like looking at the world calendar and looking at getting inspiration from that, I think that's a really interesting idea, and tying into something. So like if you're talking about developing an outreach plan, you're going to have certain programs that you do consistently throughout the year. How does everyone sort of deal with the on-the-fly things? And that could be like, how do you get inspiration? Maybe something comes up and, are you using a calendar, a world calendar to get ideas, or, and then how do you, all of the things that we've talked about, develop outcomes, goals, all of those things. So how do you handle those more, not long-term planning, programmatic things?
So basically we have of course, the big annual events that you're talking about. We have like the open day. We have one that is every semester, which is the Happiness at the Library, which is basically just inviting students to share their thoughts regarding something specific at the library, how to make it better. So one time it was, how would you reimagine the library, for example. So this event, every time we do it, it has a theme. So what we do is, when we know it's in the spring, it's always in the spring term, for example. So we always look and see what is happening during that specific month. And we try to make somehow the theme, incorporated in it. This is what we try to do, just to stay, involved with the students. I also have something that we've tried this year, and it was actually a very interesting experience, which is we worked with the student representatives of the university as a whole, and we tried to create awareness campaigns for because we have a very big issue with things like seat reservation and silence at the libraries. And it's always a really big issue. So we worked with them. So this was also very, very helpful. And they were also able to get us student volunteers. So almost every day we have a student volunteer at the front desk for a couple of hours. And their job is basically to help us through this campaign, create awareness, and also to give us ideas. So the problem is students are very hard to reach out to, and we are always suffering with this. And in our case, they don't even read the emails if we send them at all. Like, even the email doesn't work anymore. So we're trying to be a bit, creative. We're trying to have a ripple effect, and it's we tried it this year, and it was really effective. So 10 people were able to tell, 100 or 150 to come to an event.
Anybody else using or want to talk to how you handle those more on the fly or all of a sudden events?
I have one quick example that happened between myself, a library colleague of mine, and a assistant program director for one of our programs here on campus. So we had actually a student employee of ours who happens to be a student in that program reached out to me to see if it'd be a possibility to host a 1 day to 1 week event where we had research posters of students that were doing a particular social work focus or study. This was maybe 2 months ago, and idea sounded great. I informed her to let her professor know, to reach out to me about just the overall, again, vision, if you will, that she had for this particular participatory activity for her students. And we did not hear from them for about a month and a half. So let's say about a month later, or a month ago actually from now, we were getting reached out to by the particular professor, and then another colleague of hers in this program about, so when's this event going to happen and how, what do we need to do? So we were kind of like, we were waiting for you all to communicate. So essentially, how we kind of ironed things out last minute was just having in-person meetings more often and focusing less on electronic communication, whether it be phone calls or emails, and just having things written on paper as well, and people agreeing to whatever last minute terms were, being decided on the fly. The event was thankfully a success, and it involved about a total of 4 departments, including the library. But as I'm sure most of you do not like have happening in your lives, doing things last minute can be a little chaotic or hectic, if you will, and cause possible domino effect of other things on our calendar. So,
do you think you'll do that event again?
We enjoyed the event a lot. We wouldn't do it the exact same way as far as the process of planning, but it was still a great event overall. We just wish, at the library in particular, we wish that there had just been a lot more effective and advanced communication over a period of time.
So we're getting down to the last few minutes, and I want to be conscious of everybody's time. Just want to throw it open now, since we're wrapping up. Does anybody have anything that they would like to throw out there, something that we didn't talk about that you'd like to discuss?
I have a question, and maybe this isn't, I mean, for those of you who have a little bit more of a formal calendar, one of our biggest issues is with the academic calendar, it seems like there's never a good time to like plan programming, to do outreach, to plan programming, or to set up like any sort of outreach calendar. I mean, if you think about the academic calendar, for us, it's like, fall semester is so busy and crazy. And then spring semester is people are getting ready to graduate. And then summer, we do have summer courses, but a lot of our faculty are not available over the summer. So I don't know if anybody can weigh in on when the best times, when the most successful programs, when you have the most participation, and when the best times you've found for planning are.
This is actually our daily debate in my department, and we've our conclusion at this point, humbly, is that there is no best time. It's what we've realized is it's mostly the message conveyed in the communication material. Like if it includes, let's say, a sponsor or a certain company, people don't show up. Whereas sometimes, if you tell them this is for your research or, improve your research, it's all about the language of what you're describing. We're noticing that it's affecting the attendance a lot, and people are catching on. I think this is what we've established so far, because sometimes it's the peak of, the final exams, and then, people show up and they're engaged and they're there. And sometimes it's the ultimate, perfect time, and they don't show up for the same event.
For planning, we kind of do planning all year long because we have a standing committee that's programming and outreach, and we meet regularly. So the planning kind of happens all along. We have some set events that we do every year. The ones that seem to get really good attendance tend to fall in the middle of the term. We're on quarters, not semesters. But we have every term, we have a long night where we stay open extra hours and have food and have special workshops and things that we offer students, and that is a well-known event on campus, and so that has really good attendance. We also have a big sort of arts and research conference for our students that happens every spring in the middle of the term. But as far as planning goes, we do it all the time. So it's kind of a regular thing throughout the year. We don't do really any outreach in the summer because most of our students and faculty are not around. But otherwise, we are pretty much going all year long.
We're in the same boat. We're on the quarter system. We plan constantly for everything. And yeah, we haven't found like that there's one great time, but middle of the quarter for some things. We also recently just started doing what we were calling right nights and long nights against procrastination. And the middle of the quarter, because it seems to be midterms basically for 5 weeks. We do it like right in the middle, and those seem to be the most effective times. But other than, yeah, sometimes we think it'll work for other things like workshops. We just tried one during the middle of the quarter and lots of interest on social media, and then nobody showed up. So it's just hit or miss. Okay, we're about at time here. Just want to thank everybody for attending the discussion today. I hope that at least you got to take one thing away. You will receive an email after the discussion, and I think in the next day or so, asking for feedback. So we hope you'll complete this, and so we can help to improve the discussions for the future. Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Have a
Bye.
great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.